basically, we spent like a week and a half together. I flew back to New York, and then 6 weeks later, I flew back to Paris on a one-way ticket.
You hauled to Paris?
I U-hauled straight there. We broke up very shortly after.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Made It Out. Today's guest is Rebekah Peppler. She is a food writer and stylist, and she's here to talk to us about her life journey, her coming out, and her new cookbook, Le Soude, which is not just a cookbook, it is a beautiful piece of queer art. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here.
All right, let's get started.
Amazing.
Can you tell me about your upbringing?
Yeah, well, I'm from Wisconsin originally. I grew up in Oshkosh, which is the hometown of Oshkosh B'gosh.
I literally was just thinking that.
It was my first job. I sold children's overalls. They also had adult sizes at that time as well.
Wow.
So my mom still gardens in my pair that I wore to work every day.
Oh, cute.
And yeah, I grew up like kind of on the outskirts of town. And so I had like fields behind my house, and it was very like bucolic and beautiful. I went to university there as well, and then I moved to New York City and never moved back. Kept moving kind of further east, I suppose.
Did your parents cook a lot? How did you get into food?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, they cooked to feed me, but it wasn't a big like cooking household. It wasn't like we kind of like gathered around that so much. My grandmother's an incredible baker. And my mom grew up on a farm, and so like fresh produce and kind of like fresh ingredients are really important. And so that was kind of instilled early on. But I'll say like my interest in food, I kind of took hold organically. I don't really know exactly where it came from. It's not that I wasn't eating delicious things growing up, but it was a lot of like cheese and dairy and kind of all the things you expect people to say when they say they're from Wisconsin. Yeah. Yes.
What was gay representation like for you growing up?
There wasn't really any. No, there wasn't really anything. I didn't have any representation around me, and also didn't really know that I was part of the queer community. I kind of like didn't even have that as like an option, really, if you will. Like it just kind of was like, like I just was like, oh, I must be in a relationship when I like started to like date with men. Later on, after I came out, I actually have like a repressed memory of like kissing a girl in like 8th grade, I think. But, I was thrown back into the closet pretty fast and didn't come out until I was in my mid-late 20s after that. But when I was growing up, it just really wasn't something that was talked about or even kind of like given as an option. My grandparents are very religious, and so that came into play in my life in some ways. My mom had left the church, so it wasn't like it was like in my immediate house, but they were a big part of my life.
Sure.
And so it just like never came up as even like an option. It wasn't like you can't be gay. It was like, what's gay?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What brought you to New York?
Basically, I went to university and studied journalism, and then I did my minor in art history and creative writing. And I always knew I wanted to write about food, but I also knew that I didn't have any contacts in the food industry or like any knowledge of like what writing about food really even meant. And so I applied to go to pastry school in New York.
Wow.
And moved to New York. I lived in Ditmas Park with like a band, basically, and I slept on like an air mattress on the floor for my first year and did night school and worked during the day. I brought them cakes home, and like we would all eat cake together, and I would go to bed and they would go out and like play a gig.
There's benefits to living with someone in pastry school.
Yeah. It's benefits to living with a band too. There's always somebody awake when you get home late at night.
When you were in New York, living in New York, were you dating? Were you dating guys?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
I was pretty much a serial monogamist.
Okay.
Yeah. I dated men kind of all through like high school and college. I had like long-term boyfriends, and then I moved to New York, met somebody else, dated him for a while. So I was pretty much like dating men the entire time. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay there until we started to
slowly making our way across the Atlantic? So I was in New York for about 8 years, but as I was kind of inching towards that 10-year mark, everyone's like, live in New York for 10 years, you're a New Yorker. And I like that for me was not something I actually wanted.
Too committal?
Yeah. I was like, oh, no. That's not what we were going for here. But basically I was, starting to work in the industry, but I started kind of on the food styling side of things. I got an internship while I was in school, and I was working on a TV show, and then the EP hired me to do another TV show in food. And so I kind of like made my way into that industry, which is such a cool industry to be in. I love the production side of things, but it's also not what I wanted to do necessarily. I really wanted to write more. And so I was, 26 and like kind of like thinking about like, if I do this for another 10 years, I'm going to be living in New York forever. Cause like there's no option then to leave, in my young mind. And I really want to write about food. And I feel like this writing side of things isn't going to happen if I stay in New York. And kind of at that same time, I was feeling this, like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I got this like gut feeling of just like, there's change coming. Like, I know it's coming. I'm like ready for it. I want it. I think I know what it is, which is, I thought I would be a writer. And I know it's not going to happen if I stay where I am. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to split time between New York and somewhere else. And that'll open up this kind of like path for this change to come into my life. And I actually thought about Los Angeles for a little bit, but I don't know, Paris was kind of in the back of my mind. Like the pastry school kind of instilled that in. I always wanted to live abroad. I studied a lot overseas when I was in university, never in France actually, but other places. And I always like wanted that to be something I got to explore. And I was like, great, I'm single. I can do what I want right now. Yeah. Like I'm gonna split time between somewhere. And at the time I like went and got a coffee with a friend. I'm telling her this like, idea in my head. And she goes, oh, I have a friend in Paris actually who was just telling me they want to swap apartments for the summer. Like, do you want me to connect you with her?
Wow.
And so it was like, everything opened up. We swapped apartments. I, moved to Paris for 6 weeks and hated it for the first 2 weeks. It was brutal. I don't speak the language. Yeah. It was also August. So like everything's closed in Paris in August too. So you're not getting the real experience of the city. I didn't have any friends. Like, it was just like, I was like, oh, this might not be the right thing for me. Like this feels like it might be too hard. And then like 3 weeks in, something just switched and I was like, shopping at the market and like doing all the things we think of when we think of moving to France. And I was like, wow, this is actually kind of nice. I made a friend, which helps.
That's all it takes.
It's one friend. Yes. His name's Thibaut. We love Thibaut. He's very, very influential in so many ways in my life. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to like start splitting my time between Paris and New York. I'll get a visa, work visa. Like basically I'll go back to New York, do all the paperwork, get it all, the ball all rolling. And then like in a year, I'll be like in Paris.
Right.
Legally.
Yes.
And then I walked into a perfume shop in the Marais and there was a beautiful woman behind the counter and I fell head over heels in love immediately. Like it was just, they say in French, like a coup de coeur, like it was like a shock to the heart. And it was a big shock because I did not expect to fall in love with a woman.
Right.
To fall in love in general, but right. And so I like basically like panicked, was able to talk to her, which was, I was very proud of myself. I basically was like, you have to turn around and talk. Like you can't just leave this store. Like this is crazy.
What did the interaction look like?
It was very like casual. I'm sure I like stumbled and like blushed and like was a total mess, but like she was very lovely and fine.
And at this point, are you speaking English or French?
English.
Okay.
Yes. Oh my God.
I'm like,
No. She's French, but she was speaking English with me kindly, and cutely. Like it was very adorable English too. And so I left and I called my best friend like immediately from the street. And fortunately she was like coming the next day to visit. And I was like, something happened. I might be gay. Like, I don't know what to do. And she was like, just don't do anything. I'll be there in like, 8 hours or whatever. Like literally just stay where you are. I'm coming. And she came and she basically forced me to go back to the perfume shop. She was like, we have to go. I want to meet this person. Like, you need to see this person again. Like, let's go. Like, I want to buy a perfume. And I was like, okay.
That's a good friend.
She's a great friend. And we go back in. The woman is there. It turns out her coworker called in sick that day, so she wasn't supposed to be in. So like, it's just, everything's just really working out. Mm-hmm. And we talk. I panic again, but my friend buys perfume, which was a very helpful kind of like entry point. As we're leaving, I'm like, oh, I should like give her my number. I should give her my name, like something. And, Jade's like, do it. She's like giving me her like metro ticket to like write my name. And I'm like, I can't do it. Let's go get some rosé. And so we went and like got like pretty drunk. Because I needed to. I was like, I got to process this, and I don't think I can, I think I need to open my mind a little bit. And so we get a bottle of wine, we get another bottle of wine, we go to dinner, we come back to the Airbnb that we had been sharing, and my phone just like blows up with all of these messages from this woman who had found me in the ethers of the internet. And we went out on a date. It was great. Basically, we spent like a week and a half together. I flew back to New York, and then 6 weeks later, I flew back to Paris on a one-way ticket.
U-Haul to Paris? I
U-hauled straight there. We broke up very shortly after. And it was epic. It was like, we were like, it was around, I think the shortest way to say this is like, we were at the Moulin Rouge and there were 3,000 other lesbians there, and we broke up in the middle of it.
There you go. This is a very lesbian story.
It felt perfect. Like, it felt like exactly what needed to happen. And then like, long story, very short, and to like connect to the book that we'll talk about, she is now a dear friend. We went through a phase of not talking, and is the illustrator in my latest book.
It's just so beautifully lesbian. I love it.
It really just like cinched together really nicely. So
that is actually perfect, because there's a quote in your book that I love. It's, both my wife and ex-girlfriend were present when we shot this in Marseille. My other ex-girlfriend edited this very headnote, and that, my friends, is lesbian culture. And it just so is.
It just very much is.
How did figuring out your identity change your work and how you express yourself?
Discovering my sexuality really kind of came about as I was kind of discovering myself as a writer. And so they've come hand in hand together. I've definitely grown in it. I feel like Le Sud is the queerest and kind of the most out of my books. But the cookbook writing and coming out kind of came hand in hand, which was really great. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really nice, because I am interested in exploring the way that, you can queer a cookbook, and the way that we can, there are so many queer people within this field that we don't necessarily get to talk about it within the work. We talk about it outside of it. There's lists of queer authors during Pride Month, and then it kind of gets set to the side. Sure. And what I was really interested in is having visibility kind of around that at all times, and being able to interweave my life into the books, and my life happens to be queer. So that's helpful.
I love that.
Yeah.
How else do you feel that your queerness is interwoven into this project?
The great thing about doing these projects, for me at least, is that I'm able to kind of weave my personal story and my personal narrative in it. So there's a lot of storytelling that comes through as maybe not inherently queer, but it is queer because I'm queer. Mm-hmm. But one of the biggest spaces, I think, are in the visuals. I really wanted this book, it's about Provence-Alpes Côte d'Azur. It's sexy. It's not all summer. And I talk about that in the book. There are 4 seasons, and I delve into them. But all the images, I wanted to have this sexiness to them. There's bare skin and salt, salt water drying on, skin. There's some images that I immediately kind of knew I wanted to create for the book. And that's kind of the fun about creating cookbooks for me, is I am creating art-driven cookbooks, and my publisher lets me do that, which is really great. I work with an incredible photographer named Joanne Pye, who lets me come up with crazy ideas and then executes them way better than I would if I were just trying to shoot it myself. But the images are really, I think, my wife is in a lot of them, which helps. My ex-girlfriend is in a lot of them, which helps. I'm in them. And that's different from my other books too, because, so my first book, Aperitif, is on drinks and snacks, the French way. And that one we shot in Paris and then kind of like around France as well. But it was more of a standard cookbook. And we really kind of just focused on the drinks and snacks and the images. And then with Atab, my second book, that includes a lot of, people in the photos, but those are all my friends. Like that's a beautiful story also. That's just like, what love looks like in a platonic way and like how you can create intimacy around a table that doesn't necessarily have to be sexual, but it can be. But for Le Sud, it's queer in that kind of not sexual way, but there's definitely undertones, kind of a through line.
There are undertones.
Happy that it came across.
It does. It does. It's beautiful. It's stunning. Is there a specific piece of writing that really showcases your queerness through your writing?
Yes. I mean, hopefully there's quite a few. But one that comes to mind is actually from my second book, Atab. And it's an essay that I had been kind of like sitting on for years and really wanted to write. And I couldn't find the right space for it or the right editor. And I didn't really want to give it up. And I wanted to control the whole thing, basically. I wanted to make sure that it was exactly the way I wanted it to be. And it's called Dumb in the Kitchen, Sub in the Dining Room.
Love.
And it's kind of like my treaty on like how to entertain, right? Like you have people over, you invite people into your home or your space, and, you tell them what time to show up. You might tell them, generally what to wear, you choose who's going to be there. You're kind of like deciding the menu for them, what they're going to eat that night. You're kind of creating the scene for them to walk into. And then the second they walk in, you flip and you're taking care of them. You're making sure you take their coat, you make sure they have a drink, you make sure their water is refilled. You kind of like, you spend your night ensuring that they are comfortable and happy and taken care of.
Yeah.
And I go into like, what I think about like alternating genders around a table, which is that it's stupid and you should never do it. And it's like gender is a construct and why are you doing this to people? But also, like, I think it's like it was a fun piece to write. Like whenever you like get to sit down and just like it comes out and it feels so good and it's like hopefully funny to other people also, because I wanted to play with it, but I also wanted to tell some truth through it. Mm-hmm. And also I feel like it's just like such an easy way, even if I didn't explain what the essay was about, like Dom in the Kitchen, Sub in the Dining Room, we all know what I mean.
Right. Yes.
Or maybe we don't, but we should. So that I think that one is probably one of my favorite kind of more queerer pieces of writing I've done.
What inspired this book?
So many things. I think the easy answer, and I'll take it, is the region. Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur is this beautiful region in the south of France, commonly referred to as Le Sud, or the South, hence the title of the book. But it kind of spans from the border of Italy and France all the way through the Camargue region. And so you're getting all of these very different landscapes and territories and foods and influences. And so you're getting that Italian influence, and then you're getting rivers and streams and the Mediterranean and the mountains and the marshes of the Camargue and river cooking. There's just like so much to the region that I was really interested in exploring. And because my background is journalism, I kind of approach all my work or all my big projects as kind of like, what do I want to like know more about? Or like, what do I know just enough about that I know I need to know more about? And so Le Sud kind of came out of that. And it also, it's my third book. So I wanted to kind of explore something outside of Paris. I think like I kind of had started building this brand, if you will, around my life in France. And Paris is such a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And I really wanted to explore this other kind of region and area. And also, have a really good excuse to go to the south of France over and over and over and over again in all seasons. It's work. I dragged my partner with me, who did kind of, such a huge lift in helping me research the book. I dragged my photography team with me to like all these different areas so we could, shoot in all different seasons and different landscapes. And so, yes, the inspiration is definitely the region itself. And then, getting to write about it and getting to write about it from kind of the lens in which I see it.
I feel like I'm going to start using that. We got to go to the south of France to shoot some lesbians.
I have so many for you.
Amazing. Look at how beautiful.
Now lives in Marseille, so we have a built-in community. I'm
Incredible.
ready. Yes. Season 4, the south of France.
I love it. Are a lot of the recipes in the book, do they come from memories that you've had or special experiences or just meals that you love? How do you narrow it down and pick?
It's hard, right? It's really hard. I think for me, especially telling the story of Le Sud, I wanted there to be a nice balance between classic Provençal recipes. Like there's definitely ratatouille in there. I needed a market chicken that, was roasted over potatoes to kind of like mimic those chickens you buy at the actual marché. There's a lot of fresh produce. There's tomatoes. There's aioli, a lot of aioli in the book. There's a lot of anchovies in the book and olives and olive oil and rosé. But I also wanted to weave in not just these kind of, cliches that are also true about the south of France, but also the kind of the whole scope of what the table of the south of France really looks like. And so to find that balance, it was a lot of classic recipes mixed with things that I had while I was there on research, mixed with things that I, it might not necessarily be classic recipes, but that were made in the South with Southern ingredients and made sense to me to have in the book. And so it is different things that went into choosing each recipe. And then I also had the kind of luxury of, because it's an art book, to also have so many images in it that I didn't need 125 recipes, right? I was able to get away with, I think there's like 80 something in the book, because I wanted you to feel when you open it, not just that you could make whatever is on the page, whatever is written there, but also you could feel like you're there. Like you can, there's a couple double page spreads that I love. There would be more if I was allowed to have it. But there's like so much more to the book than just the recipes in it. But the recipes themselves are a mix of kind of like classic, traditional, personal narrative, and then kind of an assemblage of that.
It shows. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Which recipe in the book is associated to one of your favorite memories in the south of France?
I think one of them, there's a recipe called radishes with radish leaf pesto. And that I wrote, that's not a classic Provençal dish. And so speaking to what we were talking about of like not all the recipes being like traditional Provence dishes, that one Lila, my partner, and I were in Menton, which is like the last city before you get to Italy. It's kind of the end of the French line. And we were talking to all of these incredible chefs in the area. And so many of them were telling us that they go across the border to Ventimiglia, to Italy, to the market there to shop and bring food back to cook in their restaurants. And Lila, who's, she lived in Italy for many years, she speaks fluent Italian. She was like, but we have to go. And I was like, yes, we absolutely have to go to this market. So we went over. I was like so inspired by all the different produce. I was like, I'm going to make pesto when we get back. And then promptly didn't buy anything to make pesto.
Oh, no.
So we got back to our little rental and I had some mint, and then I had these radishes and radish leaves, and I ended up just making this kind of for us in our little rental. We ate it by the pool. It was so lovely and so fresh and felt like so indicative of the place that we were. That's one of like my favorite recipe memories that definitely kind of like brings my own personal life into the book, but also feels so still very emblematic of the region.
It's like a happy accident.
It is. And, she requests that recipe all the time.
Oh, I love that.
All the time. I'm like making that pesto constantly. I'm like, I should hate it at this point, but it's good.
What did you learn about yourself writing the book? Or maybe even working with your partner through the book?
Yeah. Oh, God. Working with your partner is always a risk. I got really lucky. I have a great one. We work together very well. We our career paths are very aligned, as are our kind of like wants in the day and in our work. But I think one of the things I learned is how deeply I need to live by the sea at some point. I have built this beautiful life in Paris that I love and that I'm not leaving anytime soon. But it was going down to the south and shooting all over. I mean, we shot in Marseille, which is, all the seaside shots are there, and on the Calanques outside. And then we shot in the Luberon Valley in October. So you got that kind of like gorgeous autumn light, hilltop villages. It's beautiful there. I have a lot of friends in the area too, which was very helpful and lovely, and like makes life easier to shoot when you can borrow props from friends or like ask what market might have the thing that you need. And then we also shot at Julia Child's former home in like just outside of Grasse, which is like 30-minute drive from Cannes. So inland, and getting to kind of explore that region and kind of live in these different parts of the region felt really special, and also I think really helped me understand what the book could be and should be, and also a little bit more about kind of what I want my life to look like in the south of France as well.
I love that. Mm-hmm. We will link all of the books in our show notes. Please go buy them. This book, Le Sud, is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much.
I highly recommend it. My last question for you is, what are you working on in therapy?
So much. I think one of the biggest themes that has been coming up for me, and it's been coming up for a while. Like I have been working on this one for a bit, and it's always it kind of roves around. But because my work is so tied to kind of who I am, like we talk about, Le Sud kind of draws, there's a lot of personal narrative in the book. There's a lot of my heart and soul that goes into it. I'm working quite a bit on how to separate who I am and my worth from what I do for work. And I think especially when you are putting yourself out there and when you do want people to really like, this very personal thing you've created, you're also asking them to like you. And that can be a really tricky, dangerous little path to fall down. I think it actually informs the work and makes it really special. But I think it also can be really psychically dangerous. And so I'm working on separating. I'm working on it.
Yeah, I think everybody who kind of puts themselves out there in a creative way to some degree probably feels this. But what are the practical ways that you work on that? Like,
I don't read reviews, which, well, that's not true. I try not to read reviews. I get yelled at by multiple friends when I do, because then I text them and they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, why
what
did
have
you
you
do
done? What have we talked about? What are you talking to your therapist about? But that is one of the best ways, is to just, there's this really incredible quote from Brene Brown from years ago, and I'm going to butcher it. But it's basically, she talks about like, if you're in the arena,
I know the
one
quote.
You know that quote.
Yeah.
And that one, my partner actually sends that to me on a fairly regular basis, because it's so I should know it by heart by now, but it's, I just scroll through our WhatsApp and find it. But that's helpful for me to kind of be reminded that like, I am putting myself out there. I'm choosing to do it. It is something that's, brave in its own way. And it also comes with these other things, but like, I'm the one out there. And so when I'm reading a review, and if it can be construed as negative, it often is not anything to do with me.
Right. That is the whole quote. It's like, if you are the one putting yourself out there, do not take feedback or advice from people who aren't.
Yes.
Because they're not even in the ring.
Exactly. I'm like, get in here with me. It is not fun.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the thing I go back to the most.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
And thank you for being here. We have one more thing to do.
Yes.
We are going to make one of the drinks from the book.
The piscine.
Yes.
Which translates to pool in French. Oh. And so this is a really common thing that is done, right? You put ice in wine, and we all think it's like a faux pas. Like, you're not supposed to put ice in wine, but like, you can do it. And, there are rules, because in French, there are always rules in anything, including the language. But like, for a piscine, it should be summer. It should be hot out. You're basically just making your drink cool for longer. And if you can drink it by a piscine, that is even better, but you don't have to. We're going to use sparkling wine in ours. In the book, I use sparkling wine, but you can also use a rosé, a nice like crisp white wine works really lovely. I wouldn't piscine a red, but I'm sure somebody in the world has piscined a red and lived to tell the story.
Yes.
Not me, but so we're going to piscine some bubbles today.
All right.
Yeah.
Love it.
Do you want to do the honors of putting ice in a glass?
Yes.
So there are recipes in the book that do more than add ice into already made wine, but this is one of my favorites, and it's actually very emblematic of the south of France, too.
I love
it.
Cheers. Cheers to
Le Sud.
Le Sud.
And you.
And you. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Made It Out. Please remember to comment, like, review, subscribe, share. Find today's guest at Rebekah Peppler. Find our show at Made It Out Podcast, and find me at Mal Glowinky. Today's episode was produced and edited by Mathilde Jordan and worked on solely by lesbians.
I was in Paris. I just needed some perfume, and now I am queer.